This is Dr. Kate Baker, Senior Lecturer at the University of Liverpool.
This is Dr. Shirin. I'm a publication writer at a pharmaceutical company.
This is Dr. Siobhan O'Brien, and I'm a Tenure-Track Fellow at the University of Liverpool.
And Dr. Katy Roscoe, I'm a Leverhulme Early Career Fellow at the University of Liverpool, and you are listening to the Academy's Developing Practice podcast.
Hello, in this National PostDoc Conference special, we met up with Dr. Kate Baker, Dr. Shirin Ghodke, Dr. Siobhan O'Brien and Dr. Katy Roscoe. We chat with them about successful futures, a key theme in the National PostDoc Conference hosted by the University of Liverpool, taking place in September 2021. We hope you enjoy.
Katy, Kate, Shirin and Siobhan, my guest host Alex James and I are really pleased to be speaking to you today for this National PostDoc Conference special. We're delighted to talk to you about successful futures, a key theme of the National PostDoc Conference hosted by the University of Liverpool, taking place in September 2021. But before we get started, it would be great to hear a little bit about your background and how you've arrived at the position you're in today. So Katy, if we start with you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Katy Roscoe. So I am a historian and now based in the criminology department, so historical criminologist. And basically, you know, I did my master's at King's College. That's when they mentioned that I would choose a dissertation that would potentially define my future career. I thought that wouldn't happen, but then as it happens, I really enjoyed writing the dissertation. So I ended up doing a PhD on a European Research Council project on the global history of penal colonies and convict transportation. And then did a series of fellowships, first at the Institute of Historical Research, which is at the University of London, 3 months at the National Maritime Museum and the Caird Library there. And then I joined Liverpool in the Department of Criminology on an ESRC fellowship, which was public engagement focused, and then managed to stay on with a Leverhulme Early Career Fellowship, researching convict labour and the steamship revolution globally.
Wonderful, thanks Katy. Siobhan, if we come to you next.
Sure. So I am an evolutionary microbiologist in the Department of Evolution, Ecology and Behaviour. And I suppose, how did I arrive from this position? I guess I kind of fell into academia, really. So I probably wasn't amazing at exams in university. I didn't really know what I wanted to do and wasn't really aware of academia. And it was only sort of in my final year when we were doing our dissertation, I was like, oh, this is really good. And actually, I'm really good at this. So it was more of a continuous assessment kind of thing where I had time to process things. And I really, really loved it. And ended up then doing a master's and again, falling in love with the dissertation aspect of it. And just deciding that that's what I wanted to do and stick with it. My undergrad was actually in zoology, so my thesis was on bottlenose dolphins. My master's was on birds, and then my PhD was on microbes. So gradually got smaller and smaller. And now I think I sort of managed to tie all of these things in together to look at rapid evolution in bacteria, which are basically just small animals anyway. So
wonderful, that's great, thank you. Kate, if we come to you next.
It's always hard to know how much detail to give. So I originally trained as a veterinarian in Australia, actually. And after a couple of years in clinical practice, decided that wasn't for me. And I had actually studied biomed before that, part of the degree. And I sort of shied away from research originally because it's quite hard to decide what you want to do. And similar to what Katy said, you know, if you do your dissertation in this particular thing, then that kind of sets your path. I was a bit worried about that. So I worked as a veterinarian for a couple of years, and then I thought, no, I really do want to do something a bit more creative and open than this. So I got a PhD position at the University of Cambridge in the UK. And so I moved over here for that. And similar to Siobhan, that was on bats and viruses, so nothing like I do now. And at the end of the PhD, you know, I think with Careers Podcast, I'll try and be honest, I applied for lots of different jobs. So I wasn't committed to academia. I applied to industry. And actually, you know, I only got offered 2 of the jobs I applied for, and one was a postdoc that allowed me to stay in the UK at the Sanger Institute, which is a great place to work anyway. So I was fortunate to get that, but, you know, I wouldn't pretend it was that strategic of me. But I did get a lot of computational training, and so I sort of switched from the lab and into bioinformatics skills, and I worked on bacterial genomics and AMR. And so I did a postdoc in that, and then won a Wellcome Trust Fellowship at the end of that to continue that work. And that's when I moved to the University of Liverpool, and I got given a Tenure-Track Fellowship at the same time. And so I started building up my own group, and that was obviously a really intense time. And then sort of 3 years after starting my post in Liverpool and having a couple of people come and work for me, I got confirmed in post as a senior lecturer in 2019. And so, and continuing on with the spinning of the plates is what I do.
Brilliant, thank you. Lots of plate spinning there. And Shirin, we'll come to you next.
That's lovely. That was a varied kind of things you did. So yeah, I mean, I kind of did like that, but not at that level or scale, you can say. So my start in academics was with, bachelor's in biotechnology and master's in same. So basically just learning about molecular biology, everything that I could at that point, so that I figure out what I really like. And then in 2007-8, I just got a chance to get into, learning bioinformatics. So I did a year of a diploma in bioinformatics, learned what it is all about and stuff. And then at that point, I was kind of deciding between should I go the academics way or the business way. Yeah, I did, take the academics way, and then PhD landed up in Denmark. So biophysics, again, something new, but I was jittery, but I don't know from where my supervisor got the confidence, and then you just have to live up to that confidence. And then 3 years there, and then I did a year of postdoc in Germany. That was also in, lipoprotein, structural aspects of lipoproteins and stuff. And then at that point, I was married at that point, and then my husband is also, this is a very important part of my, decision making. My husband is also in academics, so he is associate professor here. And he was doing postdoc there when I was deciding whether to shift or not. So I just realized that when you have two people in the family having same insecurities and stuff, maybe it is nicer to have something else going on, so that we both can survive happily some way. So that's the reason I got myself, into a conference for medical writers, EMBA, in Berlin. And then after a year of lots of yes, no, I just decided to go for it. And I came to India, did publications writer, stint for 2 years, and then shifted to Lilly. Now it's been 5 years. So 7 years in all as a professional writer. And it's good. Stressful, but I think everything is.
Excellent, thank you. So it's really, really interesting to hear kind of all the kind of diverse paths that you've all taken. It's really nice. We've got a really nice mixture of different levels, and also in academia and outside of academia. So I guess the theme of today's podcast from the conference team is successful futures. So I guess the first question is probably the hardest question as well. We could probably spend hours debating this question, is what is a successful future? How do you define success in a career? Obviously, we're going to have a lot of postdocs listening to this because they're going to obviously be attending the conference, but I'd be interested to hear from Shirin first. Because you've got kind of a non-academic job. How do you define success in your career? Both personally, from like a business perspective.
So for me, I wanted to do something where, all my scientific information that I had in my brain was put to use. It was not going waste somewhere. If I was not enjoying academics as I thought I would, I just wanted to get into something allied. And medical writing gave me that opportunity. So that was my first option, to get into. And the most important, decision maker, again, as I said, it is about, finding that balance between work and home. And I thought this made the fit. And that is the entire reason. And I think if you're satisfied with what you do, that I would call success, and nothing else. I mean, your position, your struggles, that is different matter. But if you're satisfied and kind of hanging on happily, so I think that's success.
I think that is a very, very good point. And we so often see in the world of academia, people try to almost sometimes sacrifice the personal lives for the kind of, an easier or a kind of more publications, or, to be more competitive. I guess Kate, coming to you, obviously you've worked your way from PhD to postdoc. Would you agree with the definition of success that Shirin's kind of discussed? Have you ever had to sacrifice the work-life balance?
Have I had to sacrifice the work-life balance? Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bit of survivor bias, I'd tell anyone now, oh, don't work weekends, don't work late, but I did, and probably for all the wrong reasons, and I would hope not to do it again, but it is a struggle. And actually, touching on what Shirin was saying, my husband was an academic until recently, actually, and we did the inverse. He's just recently gone into industry because actually we thought it's easier to have these, to not necessarily try and juggle. But just a general comment about how to define success. I think one of the things about academia that's a blessing and a curse is that there's so many different paths you can take and so many different options, and I think when you're a postdoc, you get this idea in your head that I want to be an academic, but there's loads of different types of academics. I mean, so if anything, what I would do, the advice I would give would be firm up what you mean by that now, because if you're really into teaching, then that's it can be a very distinct path from a research focused path. And so try and think about what you want and what you need to get there, and because you define your own success, and even being an academic is not a one track path. Yeah,
that's a really good point. So I guess success in kind of your words there is coming from the self-fulfillment, the kind of the joy you get from your job, and obviously making that decision early on, what makes me happy, and therefore I'm going to be successful based on that. Katie, would you agree with that kind of definition of success? Would you anything to add?
Yeah, I was going to say I'd really agree with that. So getting this latest, so all the fellowships I'd done previously have been 1 year, and getting this latest 3-year fellowship, it coincided with the start of the pandemic, so that might have had something to do with it. But I had a bit of a crisis of confidence, to be honest, about what I finally got the security to really think about some big research questions and not be applying for jobs basically half the time. What do I do with that time? And I felt that the proposal had been really quite short. I felt pretty stumped. And so I really had to, I actually went to coaching, which I would recommend if you feel at a loss, and you can sometimes get your institution to support that. I really had to think through, okay, what do you want to achieve? You can align it strategically later, and you can do some things strategically. But I was so focused on, well, I've just got to maximize every single output. But actually, that isn't fulfilling. There are no guarantees, and that won't intrinsically motivate you. So I suppose my advice would be to really think about what you want to do. And it is quite a flexible career in certain ways. You can lean different ways. You can incorporate more teaching or more public engagement in some roles. So you want to spend some time thinking, and then, also always asking yourself, is this still serving me? Do I really want to be doing this? Because I think you can get so focused on the external markers of success that you can forget to think, well, am I actually, intrinsically motivated to do all of these things? So I found that a really necessary process for me.
Mm-hmm. That is a really great point. And I guess Siobhan as well, do you have anything to add as well? I mean,
yeah, I think everything's really been said. I guess success is such a personal thing, and it really differs amongst different people. Like, I know for me, for instance, success now looks very different to what success was maybe 10 years ago. And like Kate, now I'm all about the work-life balance, and I'm like, academia is not everything, and family is so important, and so on. But 10 years ago, I was in the lab at the weekend, and I was working really late into the evenings. And there's that question as to, like, is that why I got this job, or would I have gotten this job without doing that? And so I think it's all very well and good to say that, we have the luxury of having a work-life balance now, but unfortunately, is that necessary to do it earlier on in your career? I think for me, it probably was. For some people, it isn't. But at that time, I didn't resent that, because that's what I wanted to be doing. That for me felt like I just loved every minute of it. Now, there's no way I would want to do that. I want to live my life. I feel like I've sacrificed that, in the early parts of my career. But I just suppose it's just a personal thing. I know other people at the same stages of their career as me that love to spend all of their time working, and that's what gives them, the maximum joy. It's so different for everybody.
I think that's really interesting in terms of people's understanding of success and how that changes across your career. Shirin, I want to return to you because obviously you made the bold choice to move away from academia. Did anyone reflect back to you in terms of, oh, you're going to be less successful now or more successful? Was there any conversation around that as you were making that important choice?
Okay, so I don't remember any conversation with a third person. It was mostly my family and very, very close friends. And it's just that this decision was not easy, and it's not easy for anybody, changing your field, know if you're going to be, you're going to find success there either. You are making a change after doing a PhD, and whether your PhD, all of your hard work is going to be, thrown down the bin. So it was difficult. As I said, I took like 1 year. But no, I did not have any staunch, opposition to it. And yes, but I've heard other people, making the shift and going back to research, and they just thought that it was not for them. It was not. But yeah, as I said, I thought in a complete 360-degree way as to what I really want. Is it for me? I knew that I was not. I didn't know what exactly the job meant, but that's why I did like an internship kind of a thing at EMWA, editorial board, listened to people who had experience almost like over a year. I attended 3 of their conferences. So all those insights and people who have done, it's very important to talk to people and then make a judgment for yourself. But it is also very important not to be influenced by anybody else's judgment. So that is one of the most important things I would say, because I know I have been there as a PhD student person doing postdoc for, 5-10 years. It feels like, it's never ending. So I just didn't want to go that path because I was probably not driven enough to go that way. And I have seen my husband going through it, and I just thought I wanted to do something different. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Kate, can I bring you in here? Because obviously your husband's also chosen that path. But what about yourself? Would you ever consider a career outside of academia?
I think, yeah. I mean, I similar, I think Siobhan said, you fell into academia kind of thing. And in a way, as I said, at the end of my PhD, I applied for multiple things. So I would never be averse for it. It's quite, you do get caught up in that, I think even Shirin, you've made that decision. And I think I heard you say something like, I haven't had the drive to do it. And I don't think it's I think there's this weird baggage attached to leaving academia that shouldn't be there. But one of the things I love about academia, so I was seconded last year for 5 months to a government organisation, and 80% of my work was just this other job. And so it was a really nice kind of insight into like, actually, what would it look like if I did leave academia? And in the end, for me, and I, they had jobs going at the end, and I did think about it, but at the end, for me, it was, I can be an academic and I can go and do that, but I can't do that job and then go be an academic for 5 months. So, but I really like the flexibility that it affords.
How about you, Siobhan?
Sure. Yeah, I've definitely considered moving out of academia. I think I've done a lot of really short-term contracts, like Katy, and I think at every transition, you're forced to reassess your working situation. So if you had like a rolling contract, you would never consider really, it wouldn't be something that would come into your head, but because you're forced to think about it all the time, you're always thinking, oh God, what else is out there? Should I leave academia? What should I do? So at every step, really, I've considered leaving. I've applied for other jobs. It's just sort of the luck of the draw that I ended up getting the postdoc positions, and I was like, well, okay, well, may as well do another postdoc. Nothing's really called me outside academia that much. I have considered what I would want to do, and it's always kind of at the back of my head, like that could be good. But yeah, I sort of just feel like I'm lucky enough to be in the job that I am, and if eventually that doesn't work out for me, then these are alternative options. But definitely, yeah, I've definitely considered it and applied for things. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Katy, if we're reflecting on your career path, I'm guessing in the humanities, the pathway to industry is far less clear. So how does that affect your decision in terms of staying in academia and maybe your plans for the future?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm sort of a year and a half left now on a fellowship, and there aren't very many tenure-track fellowships for humanities. There's been a few trialled at Liverpool, but it's definitely not standard practice. So it does become a bit of a question of, well, how has this research career set me up for applying for lectureships? potentially not that well always. And thinking about the future and security. And from a personal viewpoint, and my partner hasn't got a job where it's easy to move. So with a limited geographical radius, that really limits your choices. So it is something I'm thinking about, but I do find it difficult because I think in academia, sometimes the focus is so much on what you know, and you're not very often encouraged to think of these transferable skills. When you do something like me, that's history, so it's not even contemporary, it's quite hard to see, well, how will those skills transfer? And I think that is a framing, but I think I must have to imbibe that sort of confidence in my own skill set first before I can convince employers of it. But it's definitely something that I'm considering, because at a certain point, as Siobhan said, security becomes important. And, unfortunately, some of the skills were the most obvious overlap with my skills would be things like heritage. Those museums are being closed after the pandemic and things like that. So, you've also got to be aware of the employment situation in an adjacent sector. And sometimes those are even worse in terms of precarity. So, definitely something that requires a mindset shift, I think, both in academia and personally.
I guess something that has kind of come out of these kind of conversations that we've just been having is in some ways, like, should we be challenging the way that academia defines success? I guess so. At the moment, there's so many metrics that exist out there. There's so many, journals have impact factors. You have to meet, you have to have a certain number of pages before you can get a fellowship, this, that, and the other. There's so much things been neglected. There has been some kind of positives coming out. I think, we see on Twitter and another example of now how people are starting to speak out about mindfulness and about how we should be kind of managing that work-life balance. But I guess what kind of things in academia should we be looking to change so people can have more successful futures? And I guess it's going to differ quite a lot based on everyone's experiences and based on where we work. But I guess, Siobhan, if I come to you first, what do you think needs to change in academia so people can have a more successful future, more secure future?
I feel like I really struggled with the short-term contracts. You literally you get stuck into the project and it feels like a couple of weeks later that you're already applying for the next thing. You don't know where you're going to be living in 2 or 3 years' time. You can't make any concrete plans. I did a 2-year fellowship when I was living in a different country to my husband, which was awful. It just really messes up your head. I find it just awful. I did a series of really short-term contracts, and just every step you're just absolutely sick to death of moving. And honestly, when I finally got to Liverpool, I was I actually can't even make any more friends. I'm just exhausted socially. Every time you move into a new place and you have to develop a new support network and a new network of people, and no sooner have you done that, you're in a different country and everything changes again. And I just found that really hard. It's the ultimate sacrifice, and people shouldn't have to sacrifice everything to get a job as a researcher. It's crazy. And, I just think by offering sort of longer term job prospects, you're going to get really good people. And there shouldn't be that emphasis when you're applying for things that this person needs to have research experience, for instance, all around the world. It should be fine to be in a couple of universities in the north of England if that's where you live and that's where your network is. I just think there's so much pressure on people to be I want to be a researcher, but I don't want to have to go to the States for 2 years. It's crazy. And then also having that mentality in line with also trying to retain women in academia, where they might have families and they don't want to uproot their kids from school and so on. I mean, I just don't think these two things are compatible.
Oh, that is a very good point. The one thing that I've noticed reading the bios of all four of our guests today is how much you've all traveled. You've done so many placements in so many different places, and it kind of feels insane that, like you say, you have to go almost do that to become employable and to become an academic. You have to prove that you're capable of living in 4 different places in 4 different years, which is just kind of ridiculous. I guess, Kate, coming to you, is there anything that you would have liked to have seen throughout your career? Any mechanisms in place by any university that kind of could have helped you become more successful? Well, I say more successful, that could have kind of helped you get to where you are now a bit more kind of easier, or a bit more, to make a more enjoyable experience?
This is the part where everyone decides to leave academia after listening, because we all talk about how hard it is. One thing I would say is that, you know, there's an issue in the sector in that it's very pyramidal shaped. And they're doing a lot to try and get more fellowships, which gets more postdocs onto fellowships, but actually they're not creating more jobs above that. So they're just shifting the funnel. So there are some sort of infrastructural issues which need to be addressed more long-term by changes in funders and things, but that's obviously out of our control. But I think the biggest favor I ever did myself was you just got to back yourself, because I think the problem is people leave before they leave, because you think, what if I can't get a job in a year? What's going to happen to me next? And if you can try and ignore that doubt and just enjoy what you're doing, it's a bit easier. And I think I found that a bit easier having qualified as a vet, because the whole first 5 years of my academic career, I was like, well, I'll just go back to practice. I'll just go back to practice. So have a plan B, keep, you know, what Katy was saying, know what your skills are that you can fall back on if it doesn't work out. And then you can just stop worrying about it, because too many people leave because they're worried about what will happen, not because of actually what's happened.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that is a very, very good point. And it's a shame how many people we kind of lose to that system as well. And we say lose, and I think it's a really bad way to say that, because obviously you can be very successful outside of academia as well. So I think personally, from my perspective as well, there seems to be a mindset shift, certainly in chemistry. And I guess it kind of applies to maybe more STEM-based as well, that if you leave academia, you're kind of seen as a failure because you couldn't meet that expectations and pressure. Katy, I guess you're coming from a humanities perspective. Do you feel that same pressure there? I know you spoke earlier about kind of maybe a lack of jobs or like a different kind of industry in sort of humanities area.
I think that you see these stages when people drop out, and in humanities it seems like a lot of the time they decide to go to a different type of career straight after the PhD, because there are less postdocs available on other people's funded projects, so they're more likely to do a series of visiting, like, you know, temporary lectureships or potentially their own fellowship. But of course people are still kind of hanging on, but without security. I think that's exactly the same across both fields. And so I'm sure people will move on. And I think there is a sense that you put so much time into establishing this certain set of skills, you're kind of only just now able to do the things you really want to do. And it's at that point that you're, you know, worried about the future, as Kate was saying. So I suppose what I would say is, you know, while your colleagues, some of the worst kinds, might not respect you as much, you shouldn't really care about their views. Any friends you make, I hope you can continue to make for life through work. And I suppose my feeling is that my, you know, wider family and non-academic friends would probably understand my decision much more if I left than if I stayed, because I think they think, why are you staying? And why does it matter? You know, there's quite a lot of downsides to this. So, you know, I'm pretty sure my parents would be a lot happier if I decided to do something different and would understand kind of the benefits of that more. But as we were saying earlier, you have to kind of decide your own path, I think, really.
Yeah, definitely. I think the general theme that's come out of these conversations so far has been that you define what success is to you, and you have to make yourself happy and, you know, be fulfilled in that kind of career, and that could lie kind of inside or outside of academia. I guess something that was touched on earlier by all four of you is the kind of short-term nature of postdoc contracts, and I guess that kind of makes it really, really difficult to have that you know, ideal 3 to 5 year dream plan. You know, in 5 years I'm going to be here and there. I guess that's quite an old, kind of maybe a more an old-fashioned way of looking at it. I don't know many of my friends now which have this kind of like 5-year plan. I guess Shirin, coming to you, did you ever have a 5-year plan when you were in your PhD, thinking in 5 years time I want to be here? And if you did, how has that now changed from when you first kind of made that plan?
Absolutely. This is what I wanted to touch upon when you say what needs to be changed in academics. So I think the education that academics is like a funnel, it goes down, there's a bottleneck somewhere. People are aware of it, but maybe at times they just don't know how to get out of it. So I think early on there should be mentorship, some sort of mentorship, you know, some sort of mentorship program where, you know, you are told what are your options. You are basically made to think. Now in corporate, this personal career development is a big thing. I think academics lack that absolutely completely. And, and I think that needs to be there. We have to spend every year, start of the year, you might be knowing, to start to plan your career, 5 years, you say, we have to plan for like next 1 year, 3 years, and then 5 years. So basically at all granularity. So that exercise is so helpful. It takes a humongous amount of time and it's irritating, but you need to sit and do that as a person in academics because you've seen people struggling. And then you need to really think while you're doing your PhD or while you're doing your master's itself, that it's a cone. You need to find some loopholes, or some other allied areas where you can upskill, and that would interest you later on. And also one very important thing, I think all people in academics need to be not to be scared of changes, of interests, we are in that hole, in that little peptide, I know, and I thought that was my life in the first year. But no, I mean, you have lots beyond that. And if you have a vision for that, if you have, either you have or somebody shows you that, find some mentor. If there is not a a formal process for that, but mentorship is really huge in a corporate, and I think that should be one thing. Another thing I think is in academics you see some of the sections are slow. Like when I see my husband is doing molecular biology work, so he does, cell sorting and stuff like that. It is so painfully slow. And I, as a person, am like, I don't want to think about it. So I mean, you need to find something you can do because your interests are there. But find something else along with it to support you, because you have a whole future behind, ahead of you. And you need to support yourself if you have family, well and good, So that is the two things I really would like to see some change, some sort of support.
Could I jump in there? I just think about what Shirin was saying about mentorship, and I think that's actually really important. And I think while there are mentorship forms in higher education, sometimes you're getting advice from people that haven't been on the job market in a really long time. And I think it's really important that we are offered different kinds of career development through places like the academy, and ways that we can think differently. Because I was talking to a mentor from a different era recently, and they said basically, oh, your generation, they're much less worried about the future. I was like, that's not why people are in precarious contracts. There's structural changes that are going on. And I thought that was quite, and they might suggest that, the one thing you must do is publish a lot, and that might be true, but then you might have a passion, for engagement, public engagement, and suddenly impact is the big thing. Like higher education is changing as well. So I think you need mentorship that reflects both where you might want to end up, but also the way that the university is changing, because everything has to change. None of us are resistant to change. So in terms of success, I think feeling supported through both personal networks and mentorship is probably the best way to really harness that potential, and not to feel like it's all on you alone.
No, that's a very, very good point. And like you say, sometimes we refer to academia as this kind of bubble. And I've had this similar experience. I've recently tried to get myself a mentor, and you find yourself, so I wanted a mentor to try and, to ask questions about how I would leave academia and get a job outside. But I'm asking questions to people that have been in academia for 20 plus years and don't really want to pursue that area. So they're obviously going to be biased towards telling me, well, stay in academia. So it's really interesting trying to make those connections. It's a lot harder. It's a lot easier said than done, I guess. Siobhan, you've moved around quite a lot at loads of different places. Have you ever found yourself having any mentors during your postdocs, or in academia or outside academia, and have they helped you?
I've definitely had mentors in academia who've been really, really excellent for following an academic path. In terms of leaving academia, no. And I mean, it's the same as myself. Like, I can't give people advice on leaving academia because I haven't done it. I have no idea what's out there. So I'm the least best placed person to talk about that kind of thing. So no, I haven't. I know, like, I'm not from an academic background, and I guess most of my family wouldn't be in academia. And so my brothers, for instance, would be in the corporate world, who I would sort of ask for advice. But then it would also be really nice to have some sort of mentorship from somebody who sort of knew about academia and the you know, the kinds of traits that we could bring to a corporate setting, because I think that a lot of the time people who have no experience of academia kind of misunderstand what we actually do and what kinds of skills we have for like project management and so on. And so no real mentorship to speak of in terms of non-academic jobs, no.
Okay, would it be something that you'd maybe wanted to have? I guess at that time, were you making that decision, should I stay in academia or should I leave academia? Would that have been helpful to you?
Absolutely. I did speak to one person who had left. They were an assistant professor and they'd left to become a consultant. And I did meet up with them when I was in Zurich and have a chat. And that was so useful. I mean, it was just one conversation, but just to understand why they left and the differences and so on. And I learned so much. And one bit of advice they gave me was to actually just go on LinkedIn and find jobs that you might be interested in and just contact people that are in your area and go for a coffee with them and just talk to them. Because I had no idea what you would do as a consultant. And it was always something in the back of my mind that maybe this is kind of what I would want to do. But I had no link with that world whatsoever. So really, really informative. And I found that useful. So to actually go on LinkedIn and just put yourself out there and try and meet people.
Thank you, colleagues. That's been some brilliant discussion and really helpful in terms of helping us to think through our practice. This podcast is called the Developing Practice Podcast, and we like to finish each podcast with 3 or 4 take-home tips that the listeners can reflect on in terms of their own personal practice. So if you were all to leave us with one tip for us to go away and think about, what would that be?
Yeah, I suppose my big tip would be that don't compare yourself to others. You only see their sort of outside story, not their inside one. They will have experienced failed grant rejections, failed grant applications, rejected articles, all kinds of setbacks, and you just won't see them. So don't compare yourself to them, because that's your inside story and you know what you're trying to get rather than comparing it to their outside story.
Brilliant, thank you. Kate, if we come to you next.
I've just realised what I'm about to say is a little bit of a follow-on from that, and it's about having that kind of, in academia, there's a lot of, framing who you are and what you're about and what your metrics are and, what your achievements are. But you've got to make sure that you don't lose that kind of your own internal monologue of actually what you enjoy and because you can get so busy chasing those external metrics to get where you want to go, that you can actually not pay much attention to which parts of it you've enjoyed. And then if you get to that destination and you're like, well, actually, what should I do now? You've lost a huge amount of self-development that you could have been having because you're so busy running the race. And so, by all means, reach those metrics that you need to reach, but make sure that throughout the path, you've figured out what it is that really kind of turns you on.
Shirin, if we come to you next.
So my major takeaway from this is basically to do your career mapping once in a while. Get out of that, your lab or wherever you're working. Get out of it, think about it, go to Google maybe, or go to people ask them about different fields or whatever, and try to map that interest of yours, and do accept if your interests change after 2 years, because you have to review this. If your interests change, you need to change your, I'm not saying that you change your, fields every 2 years or 3 years, but have a judgment, and also map that along with your, work-life balance that you aim for. These 3 things, if you connect well, I think it's easier. I won't say you reach the perfect situation, but it's easier, definitely.
And Siobhan, you as well.
Yeah, I suppose academia it can be so individual sometimes. It's hard to know how well you're actually doing at any point, and sort of any feedback is really, really slow. And I think that obviously leads to everyone having this sort of imposter syndrome. We're always feeling that they're never good enough and so on, and wondering how well they're doing. And someone told me before, that was probably the best piece of advice I ever got. And he was just saying, just embrace the imposter syndrome, because it literally never goes away. So you might have it when you're a PhD student and be like, oh, well, I'm a postdoc, I'll know everything. You'll get to be a postdoc, you'll think that when I'm a lecturer, I'll know everything. no one thinks they know everything. Everyone is always crippled with imposter syndrome and feels like they shouldn't be there and wonders whether they're doing good enough. And no matter, you know, you might get the most amazing accolade and the most fantastic papers, and that gratification will stay with you for about a week, after which you'll feel really, really worried again that you're not doing well enough. It's just, I think, you know, just embrace it, put it in a box somewhere and just accept it, because it just doesn't leave.
Wonderful. Embrace the imposter syndrome. Thank you so much, colleagues. We really appreciate your time today.